The old story said the galaxy was once a place of peace. Children across human space learned about the golden time, when 5 different alien races worked together like fingers on a hand. But those were just stories now. Old tales that grandparents told to make the young ones dream of better days. Dr. Hannah Kim stood at the edge of what used to be the greatest wonder in the galaxy. The treaty grove on planet Kepler 442b stretched before her like a graveyard of giants. Massive trees rose toward the purple sky, but they were dead now. Their bark was black as coal. Their branches reached up like the arms of skeletons begging the stars for mercy that would never come. 300 years ago, this forest had been alive. The trees had glowed with soft light that could be seen from orbit. Their leaves had whispered secrets in languages that no human could understand alone. But humans back then were different. They had a gift that made them special among all the thinking creatures in the galaxy. Hannah pulled her jacket tighter against the cold wind that swept through the dead forest. Her team was spread out across the grove, taking pictures and collecting samples. They were here to study the ruins and learn what they could about the old alliance. Earth wanted to know exactly how humanity had failed so completely. The alliance had been called the Treaty of the Forest because it was signed right here, under living trees that the plant-like Verdani had grown especially for the ceremony. 5 races had joined together that day. The Verdani, who looked like walking trees and could make plants grow with their thoughts. The crystal people called the Lumith, who could control pure energy with their minds. The water-loving Nerion, whose songs could calm the wildest storms in space. The mysterious Vorthak, who existed partly in another dimension and could guide ships through the strangest parts of the galaxy. And humanity, the youngest race of all. Humans were not the strongest or the smartest. They could not grow forests like the Verdani or shape energy like the Lumith. They could not sing to the stars like the Nerion, or walk between dimensions like the Vorthak. But humans had something none of the others possessed. They could understand all of them. When a Verdani spoke in the chemical language of growing things, humans could hear the meaning. When a Lumith sang in frequencies of pure light, humans could feel the emotion behind it. The songs of the Nerion touched human hearts like music. Even the strange thoughts of the Vorthak, who spoke in concepts that had no words, somehow made sense to human minds. This gift made humans the perfect bridge between races that were so different, they might as well have been from separate universes. For 200 years, human translators had helped the 5 races work together. They built cities on 1,000 worlds. They shared knowledge that advanced science by thousands of years. They kept peace in a galaxy that had known only war before the treaty was signed. But then came the sickness. Hannah knelt beside one of the largest dead trees and placed her hand on its cold bark. The surface was rough and lifeless, nothing like the smooth living wood it had once been. Her grandmother had told her stories about this tree, how it had been the heart of the grove, glowing so brightly that pilots could use it to navigate from deep space. The plague of silence had started small. A few humans on remote colonies began losing their translation abilities. At first, the doctors thought it was just stress or overwork. The gift of understanding alien languages was hard on the human brain. It required constant focus and left many translators exhausted after long sessions. But the sickness spread. Within 50 years, no human could understand any alien language. The gift that had made them special was gone, burned out of their genes by a disease that targeted the exact brain pathways that allowed translation. Without humans to bridge the gaps between them, the 5 races began to drift apart. Misunderstandings led to arguments. Arguments became fights. Fights grew into wars. The Verdani withdrew to their forest worlds and refused to speak to anyone. The Lumith built crystal barriers around their systems and shot at any ship that came close. The Nerion dove deep into their ocean worlds and sang only songs of sadness. The Vorthak disappeared into other dimensions, leaving behind only empty stations and unanswered questions. The Treaty Grove died with the Alliance. Without the combined life energy of all 5 races flowing through the treaty ceremony, the special trees began to wither. The Verdani tried to save them, but their power alone was not enough. One by one, the great trees turned black and became stone. The light that had guided travelers for 2 centuries went dark forever. Hannah stood up and brushed dirt off her knees. Her team leader, Dr. Woo Jae-hyun, walked over carrying a scanner that beeped softly as it recorded the dead forest. "Find anything interesting?" he asked. Hannah shook her head. "Just more of the same. Dead trees, empty ground, and 300 years of failure." Jae-hyun nodded sadly. The reports were right. There is nothing left here that could tell us how to fix what went wrong. Whatever made the Alliance work, it died with the trees. But Hana was not ready to give up. She had spent her whole life studying the golden age of galactic peace. She knew more about the old Alliance than almost any other human alive. There had to be something here, some clue that could help them understand why the treaty had been so powerful and why its collapse had been so complete. She walked deeper into the grove, following paths that were barely visible between the petrified trees. The wind whistled through dead branches, making sounds like voices calling from far away. Her boots crunched on leaves that had turned to dust centuries ago. At the very center of the grove stood the largest tree of all. It had been called the Heart Tree, the place where representatives of all 5 races had placed their hands together and sworn to work as one people under many forms. Now it was a black tower of stone reaching up into the cloudy sky. Hana circled the base of the Heart Tree, looking for anything that might have survived the centuries. Most of the ceremonial objects had been taken by scavengers long ago. The metal plaques that had recorded the treaty in 5 different languages were gone. Even the stone markers that had shown where each race's representative had stood were missing. But as she walked around to the far side of the tree, something caught her eye. There, nestled between 2 massive roots, was a small object that glowed with faint blue light. Hana knelt down and carefully brushed away the dirt and dead leaves. It was a seed, no bigger than her thumb, but perfectly shaped and covered in patterns that seemed to move in the dim light. As she stared at it, the patterns began to make sense. They were not just decorations. They were words. Words in 5 different languages, all saying the same thing. Hope endures. Hana reached out and touched the seed with one finger. The moment her skin made contact, her world exploded into light and sound and meaning. Suddenly she could hear voices speaking in languages she had never learned. The chemical speech of the Verdani whispered about life and growth. The crystal songs of the Lumith rang with harmonies of pure energy. The ocean melodies of the Nereon carried emotions deeper than any human words. Even the strange dimensional thoughts of the Vorthak seemed clear and understandable. For just a moment, Hana experienced what her ancestors had known. The incredible joy of understanding minds that were completely different from her own. The sense of connection that came from being a bridge between worlds. The feeling that the universe was vast and strange and beautiful. Full of friends she had never met but who were waiting for her to help them find each other again. Then the vision faded, leaving her gasping and shaking on the ground. But the seed in her hand still glowed, and deep in her mind she could still hear faint echoes of those alien voices. The gift was not gone. It had been sleeping, waiting for someone to wake it up. And now, 300 years after the Alliance fell apart, the Treaty of the Forest had chosen her to begin the healing. But healing would not be easy. As Hana struggled to her feet, her communicator began beeping with urgent messages. Her team's sensors had detected ships approaching the system. Ships from 4 different alien races, all moving toward Kepler 442b, with weapons charged and intentions that were anything but friendly. The galaxy was about to learn that some wounds, no matter how old, could still bleed. Hana held the glowing seed in her shaking hands as her team rushed toward her. The blue light pulsed like a tiny heartbeat, and with each pulse she could hear whispers in her mind. Voices speaking in languages that no human had understood for 300 years. Hana, what happened? Dr. Wu Jaehyun dropped his scanner and knelt beside her. We heard you scream from across the grove. She tried to speak but found no words. How could she explain what she had experienced? The sudden rush of understanding, the voices of 5 different alien races all speaking at once in her head. The feeling that her brain was being rewired by forces she could not begin to understand. I think I found something important, she finally whispered. Communications Officer Park. Sujin came running with her portable radio crackling with static. Her face was pale with worry. Dr. Kim, we have a serious problem. My equipment is picking up multiple ship signatures approaching the system. They are not human vessels. Jaehyun stood up quickly. How many ships? And which species? Sujin checked her readings again. At least 40 vessels from 4 different alien races. Verdani bioships, Lumith crystal cruisers, Nereon waterships, and something that might be Vorthak, but my sensors can barely detect them. They are all moving fast and their weapons are powered up. The seed pulsed brighter in Hana's hands, and suddenly she understood. The moment she had touched it, the ancient device had sent out a signal across the galaxy, a signal that told every surviving member of the old alliance that something had awakened in the Treaty Grove. something that had been sleeping for 3 centuries. They felt it, Hana said quietly. When I touched the seed, it called out to them. They know something has changed here. That does not sound good, said combat engineer Lee Minho, who had jogged over with his weapon ready. If 4 alien fleets are coming here with their guns charged, they probably do not want to chat about old times. Hana slowly got to her feet, still holding the seed carefully. The voices in her head were getting clearer now. She could make out individual words and phrases, though she did not understand how she was able to translate them. The Verdani ships carried crews who spoke in the chemical language of growing things. Their messages tasted of anger and old pain. They called the human presence in the grove root poison and death-bringers who steal from the sacred earth. The Lumith vessels sang their crystal songs of pure energy, but these were songs of war. Their harmonies spoke of thieves, of light and those who break the sacred frequencies. Their anger burned like fire in Hana's mind. From the Nerion, waterships came ocean melodies filled with deep sadness and rage. Their songs called humans the silence makers and those who killed the great harmony. The pain in their voices was so strong it made Hana's chest hurt. Most terrifying of all were the whispers from the Vorthak ships. The Dimension Walkers spoke in concepts rather than words, and their thoughts were full of darkness. They saw humans as the betrayers and those who must be erased from the memory of stars. Their hatred was so cold and complete that it made Hana shiver. How long before they arrive? Jaehyun asked. Sujin checked her instruments. The fastest ships will be here in 6 hours. The rest will arrive over the next 2 days. Dr. Kim, we need to leave now. Our transport ship can get us off planet before they reach us. But Hana shook her head. We cannot run. This seed is the key to everything. It holds the memories of the original treaty, maybe even the power to fix what was broken. If we take it away from this place, it might stop working. If we stay here, we will die, Lee Minho said bluntly. 4 alien fleets do not come to a dead world just to talk. They are coming to make sure nothing here ever wakes up again. The seed pulsed again and more visions flowed into Hana's mind. She saw the treaty grove as it had been 3 centuries ago, alive with light and filled with representatives from 5 different worlds. She saw her own great-great-grandmother, Ambassador Kang Bora, standing beside alien beings who looked at her with trust and friendship instead of hatred. But she also saw the moment when everything went wrong. The plague of silence spreading through human colonies like wildfire. The desperate attempts by human translators to keep working even as their abilities failed. The confusion and fear that grew between the alien races as their human bridges began to fall silent one by one. The alliance had not ended with dramatic battles or angry declarations of war. It had died slowly, like a plant withering without water. Each failed translation, each misunderstood message, each moment of silence where understanding used to be, had added another crack to the foundation of peace, until finally the whole structure collapsed into the chaos that had ruled the galaxy ever since. They blame us, Hana said, still receiving the angry messages from the approaching fleets. All 4 races think humanity abandoned the alliance on purpose. They believe we chose to stop translating because we got tired of helping them. But that is not true, Jaehyun protested. The plague of silence was a disease. We did not choose to lose our abilities. Hana nodded, but she could feel how little that truth mattered to the aliens racing toward them. 300 years of bitterness and isolation had convinced them that humans were traitors, who had destroyed the greatest period of peace in galactic history. They were coming to make sure humanity never got the chance to betray anyone again. The seed grew warmer in her hands, and suddenly she could see deeper into its stored memories. The device was not just a recorder of the old treaty. It was a backup plan, created by the original alliance makers in case something terrible ever happened to break their bond. The seed contained the complete genetic and psychic patterns needed to restore the translation gift to humanity. But it required more than just touching it once. To fully awaken the sleeping abilities, someone would have to bond with the seed completely. They would have to let it rewrite their brain patterns and nervous system. The process would be dangerous, possibly deadly. But it was the only way to prove to the approaching aliens that humanity still cared about the alliance they had helped create. I have to stay, Hana said firmly. This seed can give us back what we lost. But I need time to figure out how it works. You have less than 6 hours before the first ships arrive, Sujin warned. And once they get here, they are not going to wait around while you experiment with alien technology. Hana looked around at her team. These three people had followed her to the edge of known space to study ancient ruins. Now she was asking them to risk their lives for a chance to heal wounds that were older than any of them. "You should leave," she told them. "Take the transport and get back to Earth. Tell them what we found here. Maybe they can send diplomats or—" "No way," Lee Minho interrupted. "We came here as a team, we stay as a team. Besides, someone needs to watch your back while you play with that glowing thing." Jaehyun and Sujin nodded in agreement. "We are not leaving you alone on a planet that 4 alien fleets want to destroy," Jaehyun said. "Whatever you are planning to do with that seed, we will help you do it." The seed pulsed again, brighter this time, and Hana felt a warm surge of gratitude. Not just for her loyal team, but from the device itself. Somehow it approved of their choice to stay and fight for the Alliance instead of running away. As the purple sun of Kepler 442b began to set behind the dead trees of the Treaty Grove, Hana Kim prepared to attempt something that no human had tried in 3 centuries. She was going to resurrect the gift that had once made humanity the bridge between worlds. The alien fleets were coming with weapons and anger and 300 years of pain. But they would find something waiting for them that they had not expected. They would find hope. The first alien ship arrived just as the sun disappeared behind the dead trees. It was not one of the war fleets that Sujin had detected on her instruments. This was something smaller, older, moving with the slow, careful flight of a creature that had seen too much pain. Hana watched from the center of the grove as the bioship settled between the petrified trees like a wounded bird. The vessel was clearly Verdani, its hull made of living wood that had grown into the shape of a ship. But this wood was sick, covered with dark spots and twisted growths that spoke of centuries of neglect and sorrow. The seed in her hands pulsed with recognition, and through its power, Hana could feel the emotions of whoever was inside the ship. Grief so deep it felt like drowning, loneliness that stretched across 300 years, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. A hatch opened in the side of the bioship, and a figure emerged that made Hana gasp. The Verdani was ancient even by the standards of a race that lived for thousands of years. Its bark-like skin was scarred and weathered, and some of its branch arms had been broken and regrown many times. Moss hung from its shoulders like a funeral shroud, and its root feet moved slowly across the ground as if every step caused pain. "That is Thornwarden seed speaker Grutka," Hana whispered, her translation gift allowing her to understand the chemical patterns that served as the creature's name. The record said he died centuries ago. The ancient Verdani approached slowly, ignoring the weapons that Lee Minho had raised in warning. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of wind through dying leaves, and thanks to the seed, Hana could understand every word. "So the rootless ones have returned to steal from the sacred grove," Grutka said. The chemical signature of his speech carried overtones of disgust and old anger.
"Have you not taken enough from us, children of the burning worlds?"
"Must you also disturb the final resting place of our greatest failure?" Hana stepped forward, holding the seed where the Verdani could see it. "We did not come to steal. We came to understand, and we found this." Grutka's ancient eyes, like knots in old wood, focused on the glowing seed. The chemical patterns of his speech changed instantly, shifting from anger to shock to something that might have been wonder. "Impossible," he breathed. "The last seed was lost when the heart tree died. We searched for decades, but it had vanished with all the other treasures of the Alliance. It was buried here, waiting," Hana said. "It called to me when I touched it, and now I can understand you just like the old translators could." The Verdani moved closer, his root feet making soft scraping sounds on the ground. "You speak the growing tongue as if born to it. But that gift died with the silence plague. How is this possible?" Hana felt the seed pulse again, and suddenly her mind filled with images from its stored memories. She saw the original treaty ceremony as if she had been there herself. Representatives from 5 races standing in a circle around a young tree, their hands joined in friendship. And at the center of it all, a human woman who looked exactly like Hana herself. "That was Ambassador Kang Bora," Hana said, recognizing her ancestor from old family photographs. "She was my great-great-grandmother." Grutka stared at her with new interest. Bora of the gentle voice was the greatest translator who ever lived. She could speak all our languages as if they were her birth tongue. When she died fighting the silence plague, the Alliance lost its heart. More images flowed from the seed into Hana's mind. She saw her ancestor working day and night as the plague spread through human colonies, trying to maintain communication between the alien races, even as her own abilities began to fail. She saw Bora's final message to the Alliance, promising that humanity would find a way to restore the bridge between worlds, even if it took centuries. She knew this would happen, Hana realized. The plague, the collapse of the Alliance, all of it. That is why she helped create the last seed. It was meant to preserve the translation gift until someone could use it to bring the races back together. Grutka settled his ancient form on the ground, his root feet digging into the soil around the heart tree. The Bora child speaks of bringing together what has been torn apart. But some wounds are too deep to heal. Do you know what happened after your people fell silent? Hana shook her head, though the seed was already showing her glimpses of the chaos that followed humanity's fall. Without translators, we could not understand each other, Grutka continued. The Lumith sang their crystal songs, but we heard only noise. The Nerion called to us from their ocean worlds, but their voices sounded like the screaming of storms. The Vorthak tried to share their dimensional wisdom, but their thoughts felt like madness in our minds. The old Verdani's chemical speech grew heavy with sorrow. Fear replaced trust. We began to wonder if the other races had always hated us, if their friendship had been lies that only humans could make us believe. The Lumith attacked first, claiming that Verdani bioships were spreading plague across their crystal worlds. We defended ourselves, and soon all 5 races were at war. Hana felt tears running down her face as she experienced the memories flowing from both Grutka and the seed. Entire star systems burned as former allies turned their most terrible weapons on each other. The Verdani's living worlds withered under Lumith energy attacks. Crystal cities shattered when Nerion songs turned from healing to destruction. Vorthak thought weapons drove entire populations insane with dimensional nightmares. The war lasted 50 years, Grutka said. When it finally ended, none of us had the strength to fight anymore. We retreated to our home systems and swore never to trust outsiders again. The galaxy became a dark and lonely place. But even as he spoke of darkness, Hana could sense something else in the ancient Verdani's chemical patterns, a spark of the same hope that the seed carried. Despite 3 centuries of isolation and pain, part of him still remembered what the Alliance had been like when it worked. Why did you come here? Hana asked. Your war fleets will arrive soon. Why risk meeting with humans again? Grutka was quiet for a long moment, his ancient form swaying slightly in the evening breeze. Because I was there when the first treaty was signed. I remember what it felt like when 5 races became one people. I remember the songs we sang together, each in our own voice but all carrying the same melody of hope. He looked directly at Hana, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. I felt the last seed awaken when you touched it. For the first time in 300 years, I heard the harmony that we lost. It was faint and far away, but it was real. The seed pulsed brighter, and Hana felt her translation abilities growing stronger. She could now sense not just Grutka's words, but his emotions, his memories, even some of his deeper thoughts. The connection was weak compared to what the old translators had achieved, but it was a beginning. The other fleets are coming to destroy this place, she said. They think humanity betrayed the Alliance on purpose. How can we convince them that the plague was not our choice? Grutka's root feet dug deeper into the soil, and Hana felt him connecting with the buried network of dead roots that still ran beneath the grove. Even after 3 centuries, some part of the original treaty forest remained, sleeping but not completely gone. Truth alone will not be enough, the ancient Verdani said. The other races have built their entire identity around hating humanity. They will not easily give up 300 years of anger and pain. He gestured toward the heart tree with one of his branch arms. But if the last seed can truly restore what was lost, if it can prove that the Alliance was real and not just a human trick, then perhaps there is still hope. Hana felt the seed growing warmer in her hands, and new visions began to flow through her mind. Not memories this time, but possibilities. She saw the dead grove coming back to life, but different than before. New trees that carried the essence of all 5 races, stronger than the original forest because they were built on the foundation of shared pain and healing. The seed wants to grow, she said, understanding flooding through her, but not into the same kind of tree that died here. It wants to become something new, something that can survive even if the bridge builders fall silent again. Grutka's ancient eyes brightened with something that might have been joy. A tree that speaks all languages, even to those who cannot hear. A forest that remembers friendship even when friends forget each other. The sound of approaching engines filled the air as more ships began entering the atmosphere. The war fleets had arrived, and soon the grove would be full of angry aliens who had spent centuries dreaming of revenge against humanity. But Hana was no longer afraid. The seed had shown her the truth about the Alliance, and more importantly, it had shown her how to rebuild what was broken. The coming confrontation would be dangerous, possibly deadly. But for the first time in 300 years, the galaxy had a real chance at peace. She looked at Grutka, who nodded slowly in understanding. The ancient Verdani had chosen his side in the battle that was about to begin. Now they had to hope that hope would be stronger than hatred. The sky above the treaty grove filled with ships as the alien fleets arrived. Hana watched from beside the heart tree as vessels of 4 different races took positions around the planet, like pieces on a war board. Each fleet carried enough firepower to turn the entire world into glowing dust. The Lumeth crystal ships came first, their hulls shining like diamonds as they caught the light from Kepler 442b's purple sun. These were not the peaceful research vessels that had once explored the galaxy alongside human crews. They were weapons of war, each one shaped like a massive crystal blade that could focus stellar energy into beams hot enough to crack planets. 12 Lumeth dreadnoughts. Communications Officer Park Soo-jin reported from her portable equipment. Each one is broadcasting warnings in the old battle language. They are telling us to leave immediately or be destroyed. The Nerion waterships arrived next, their biomechanical hulls rippling like living ocean waves. These vessels had been grown rather than built, shaped from the same materials as the great sea creatures of the Nerion homeworld. But where once their songs had brought peace to troubled systems, now their voices carried nothing but threats. Combat engineer Lee Minho studied the approaching fleet through his scope. 23 Nerion bioships, all of them singing war songs. I can hear them even from here. The sound makes my teeth hurt. Most frightening of all were the Vorthak vessels, which existed partially outside normal space. They appeared as dark shadows against the stars, ships that seemed to flicker in and out of reality. Looking at them for too long made Hana's eyes water and her head spin with dimensional sickness. I cannot get an accurate count of the Vorthak ships, Soo-jin said, frustration clear in her voice. My instruments say there are anywhere from 15 to 40 of them. But they keep phasing in and out of this dimension. Their thought weapons are already active. I can feel them pressing against my mind. Dr. Woo Jae-hyun stood beside Hana, watching the growing fleet with the calm expression of a man who had accepted that he might die today. They are not here to talk. This is an invasion force designed to make sure nothing on this planet ever lives again. But Hana was not watching the ships. She was focusing on the seed in her hands, which had grown brighter as each new fleet arrived. The ancient device was responding to the presence of the alien races, awakening more of its stored power with every passing moment. They are afraid, she said quietly. All of them. Under all that anger and hatred, they are terrified that we might actually be able to fix what was broken. The seed pulsed again, and suddenly Hana could feel the power flowing out of it and into her nervous system. The sensation was like being struck by lightning, but instead of pain, it brought understanding. Her brain was changing, developing new pathways that allowed her to process alien languages as easily as breathing. But the change came with a cost. Hana felt something burning in her skull, the same kind of genetic damage that had marked the end of the Plague of Silence era. The seed's power was literally rewriting her DNA, and her human body was not designed to handle such massive changes. Hana, your nose is bleeding, Jae-hyun said with concern. She wiped the blood away with her sleeve, but more kept coming. The seed was awakening abilities that had been sleeping in human genes for 300 years, but the process was dangerous. If she pushed too hard, too fast, she might burn out her brain completely. I need to share the load, Hana said, understanding what had to happen next. The original translators worked in teams. No single human was meant to carry the full burden of bridging 5 different species. She turned to her teammates, holding the seed where they could all see it. I can pass some of this power to you, but it will change you. Your brains will be rewired to understand alien languages. The process might kill you or drive you insane or leave you damaged in ways we cannot predict. Lee Minho stepped forward without hesitation. I have been a soldier my whole life. I know how to accept dangerous missions for the greater good. Count me in, Soo-jin added. If there is a chance to prevent a war that could destroy the galaxy, I want to help. Jae-hyun nodded slowly. We came here to study the Alliance, Now we have a chance to rebuild it. I would rather die trying than live knowing I could have made a difference. Hana felt tears mixing with the blood on her face. These three people were willing to risk everything based on her belief that the seed could restore peace to the galaxy. She had never felt so grateful or so terrified in her life. One by one, she touched each of her teammates with the seed. The power flowed out of the ancient device and into them, awakening abilities that their human ancestors had possessed centuries ago. But the process was even harder on them than it had been on Hana. Jaehyun screamed as the Verdani plant speech burned new pathways into his brain. His body convulsed as he learned to understand the chemical language of growing things. When the change was complete, he could hear the thoughts of every plant on the planet. From the smallest grass to the massive root network still sleeping beneath the grove, Sujin collapsed as the crystal songs of the Lumith filled her mind. The mathematical poetry of pure energy was too complex for normal human consciousness to process, and for several terrifying minutes, Hana thought her friend might die from the overload. But slowly Sujin's breathing steadied, and when she opened her eyes they sparkled with reflected light from the Lumith ships above. Lee Minho's transformation was the most violent of all. The Nerion ocean songs and Vorthak dimensional thoughts hit his military-trained mind at the same time, and he writhed on the ground as his consciousness expanded to encompass forms of thinking that existed partly outside normal space and time. When the process ended, he could hear the emotional frequencies that connected all living things across multiple dimensions. But they had survived. All four humans now carried fragments of the translation gift that had once made their species the bridge between worlds. It was not as complete as what the old ambassadors had possessed, but it was enough to begin the work of healing. The seed had grown dim after sharing its power, but it was not empty. If anything, it seemed more alive than before, as if giving away its stored energy had awakened something deeper within it. Hana could feel it wanting to grow, to put down roots and become the heart of a new kind of forest. The fleets are moving into attack position, Sujin reported, her voice now carrying harmonic overtones that had not been there before. All ships are powering weapons and preparing for bombardment. Above them, the crystal ships of the Lumith began to sing their war songs. Frequencies of light that could shatter matter at the molecular level. The Nerion bioships answered with melodies of destruction, sounds that could drive entire populations insane with despair. The Vorthak vessels started charging their thought weapons, preparing to erase the human minds below from existence itself. But Hana was no longer afraid. The seed in her hands was ready to fulfill its purpose, and she finally understood what her great-great-grandmother had planned 3 centuries ago. This was not just about restoring the old alliance. It was about creating something better, something that could survive even if the bridge builders fell again. Grutka, Hana called to the ancient Verdani, who had been quietly watching the transformation of the human team. Is the root network under this grove still alive? The old tree being pressed his hands against the ground, sending chemical signals deep into the soil. Yes, child of Bora. The roots sleep, but they remember. They are ready to grow again if given the proper encouragement. Hana knelt beside the base of the heart tree and pressed the seed against the dead bark. Then let us give them something worth growing for. The moment the seed touched the petrified wood, the entire grove erupted in light. Not the harsh glare of weapons preparing to fire, but the soft green glow of life returning to places that had been dead for centuries. The war fleets above hesitated, their attack patterns disrupted by the sudden change on the planet below. For the first time in 300 years, the treaty grove was coming back to life. And even the angriest aliens could not help but stare in wonder at what was happening. The real battle was about to begin, but it would be fought with words and memories and the hope that some wounds, no matter how old, could still be healed. The light from the awakening grove spread outward like ripples on a pond, touching every ship in the alien fleets above. For a moment that stretched into forever, weapons stopped charging and engines went silent. Even the angriest warriors could not help but stare, as life returned to a place that had been dead for 3 centuries. New trees began growing around the heart tree, but these were not the same as the original forest. These trees glowed with light that shifted through different colors, carrying patterns that spoke in the visual languages of all 5 races. Their roots reached deep into the soil and connected with the ancient network that Grutka had awakened, creating a living web of communication that stretched across the entire grove. Hana stood at the center of it all, her hand still pressed against the heart tree where the seed had taken root. She could feel the new forest growing around her, and through her enhanced abilities she could hear the voices of every alien on every ship above. Their shock and confusion mixed with 3 centuries of anger to create a storm of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her human mind. "They are coming down," Communications Officer Park Soo-jin said, her voice now carrying the harmonic frequencies she had inherited from the Lumith crystal songs. "Representatives from all 4 fleets, but they are not coming in peace." The first ship to land was a Lumith crystal vessel that settled between the glowing trees like a fallen star. Its hull was perfectly clear, allowing everyone to see the being inside. Crystal Zinger, bright edge of dawn, was beautiful in the way that cut glass was beautiful, all sharp angles and reflected light, but her crystal form pulsed with aggressive red frequencies that hurt to look at directly. She emerged from her ship surrounded by a group of armed guards, their crystal bodies singing war songs that made the air itself vibrate with dangerous energy. When she spoke, her voice was like the sound of breaking glass, and only Soo-jin could fully understand her words. "The thieves dare to wake the sacred frequencies," Bright Edge of Dawn sang in mathematical harmonies that cut through the air like knives. "You steal the light patterns of the heart tree and claim them as your own. This is worse than grave robbing. This is the murder of memory itself." The second ship belonged to the Nerion, and it landed in a clearing that immediately filled with artificial water from the vessel's biomechanical systems. Songcaller Deep Current Runner flowed out of her ship like living liquid, her form shifting between solid and fluid as her emotions changed. Her songs were deep and mournful, carrying 3 centuries of pain in every note. Combat Engineer Lee Minho felt her words as much as heard them, his new abilities allowing him to understand the emotional frequencies of Nerion communication. "She says her people suffered the most when the Alliance fell. The peaceful Nerion became targets for every aggressive species in the galaxy. Entire ocean worlds were boiled away by energy weapons. She holds humanity responsible for abandoning them to their fate." The third arrival made everyone step back in fear. The Vorthak ship did not land so much as phase into reality, appearing and disappearing in spaces that hurt the brain to perceive. Mindwalker through empty spaces emerged from impossible angles, their form shifting between dimensions in ways that made looking at them directly dangerous. Lee Minho pressed, his hands against his temples as the Vorthak's thoughts pressed against his mind like ice-cold needles. "They speak in concepts rather than words. They believe the Alliance was always doomed because different forms of consciousness cannot truly understand each other. They see the Grove's awakening as proof that humans want to trap other species in false unity again." Last to arrive was a Verdani ship, but not the ancient bio-vessel that had carried Groot Ka. This was a newer craft, its living hull scarred by 3 centuries of war and isolation. From it emerged Rootgard Strongbranch and Storm, a Verdani warrior whose bark skin was marked with the patterns of a dozen different battles. Dr. Woo Jae-hyun felt the newcomer's chemical speech like poison in his enhanced senses. "This one is not like Groot Ka. Strongbranch and Storm leads a faction that believes all non-plant species are parasites that should be eliminated. They want to reclaim the Treaty Grove and prevent any other race from ever touching it again." The 4 alien representatives stood in a rough circle around the growing trees, their guards forming an outer ring of weapons and hostile intent. The psychic pressure of their combined hatred and suspicion was so strong that several of Hana's team began bleeding from their ears and noses again. But Hana stood firm, drawing strength from the new forest growing around her. Through the enhanced connection provided by the Awakening Grove, she could feel not just their anger but the pain beneath it. These beings had spent 3 centuries nursing wounds that had never been allowed to heal. "I know you hate us," she said, her words automatically translated by the Grove's living network into all 4 alien languages simultaneously. "I know you blame humanity for the collapse of the Alliance, but I have seen the truth in the memories of the last seed." She gestured toward the heart tree, where new growth was spiraling up the ancient trunk like green fire. "The plague of silence was not our choice. We were attacked by an enemy that wanted to see the galaxy tear itself apart. They targeted us because our translation abilities were the glue that held the Alliance together." Crystal Singer Bright Edge of Dawn's crystal form flashed with angry red light. "Lies and excuses. You humans always have explanations for your failures. But explanations do not bring back the crystal cities that fell when the harmony ended." Songcaller Deep Current Runner's mournful songs grew deeper and more bitter. "Your words mean nothing. 300 years too late for words. The ocean worlds remember every ship that died while calling for help in languages you could no longer hear, Mindwalker. Through empty spaces projected concepts of betrayal and false hope directly into everyone's minds, thoughts so cold and sharp that they felt like mental knives. Unity between species is an impossible dream. Consciousness cannot bridge gaps between different forms of being. Alliance was doomed from beginning. Even Rootguard's Strong Branch and Storm added their chemical voice to the chorus of accusation. The root killers speak of enemies and excuses, but the trees remember truth. When the great dying began, you humans fled to your burning worlds and left the growing things to wither alone. The weight of their combined hatred and pain pressed down on Hana like a physical force. 300 years of accumulated grief and anger had created wounds so deep that words alone could never heal them. These beings did not just hate humanity. They had built their entire identities around that hatred. But the grove continued to grow around them, and with each new tree that took root, Hana felt her connection to the alien minds growing stronger. She could sense memories buried beneath their anger, fragments of what the Alliance had been like before the plague destroyed it. Slowly, carefully, she began to share those memories through the grove's living network, not forcing them on the hostile representatives but offering them like gifts. Images of Verdani and humans working together to grow forests on dead worlds. Lumeth and human scientists discovering new forms of energy that could power entire star systems. Nerion and human explorers mapping the deepest parts of space, their songs and words harmonizing across the void. Vorthak and human philosophers discussing the nature of consciousness while walking between dimensions. For just a moment, the hatred in the clearing wavered as 4 species remembered what friendship had felt like. But then Strong Branch and Storm's chemical speech cut through the peace like acid. Pretty dreams and false memories will not change what you did to us. You broke the sacred trust and left the galaxy to burn. Some wounds are too deep to heal. The other representatives nodded in agreement, their weapons raised and their minds closed to any possibility of reconciliation. They had not come here to make peace. They had come to ensure that humanity never got the chance to betray anyone again. But Hana was not finished. The grove was still growing, and buried in its roots were secrets that even the ancient Verdani had forgotten. Secrets about the real enemy that had destroyed the Alliance, and the price that humanity had paid to keep fighting, even after their voices were silenced. The true battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. The grove trembled as Hana reached deeper into the memories stored in its growing roots. The trees around her pulsed with light as ancient secrets began to surface, truths that had been buried for 3 centuries beneath layers of pain and misunderstanding. "There is something you need to see," Hana said, her voice growing stronger even as her body grew weaker from the strain of channeling so much alien consciousness. "The last seed contains more than just the power to restore our translation abilities. It holds the complete record of what really happened during the final days of the Alliance." The 4 alien representatives stood rigid with hostility, their weapons still raised and their minds closed to anything that might challenge 300 years of carefully nurtured hatred. But the grove itself was beginning to affect them, its growing network of roots and branches creating connections that bypassed their conscious defenses. Crystal Zinger, Bright Edge of Dawn, was the first to waver. Her crystal form began resonating with frequencies from the heart tree, harmonics that carried memories older than her anger. "What trickery is this? The light patterns speak of things that cannot be true." "Not trickery," Hana gasped, blood running from her nose as the strain of translation grew almost unbearable. "Truth. The truth about who really destroyed the Alliance." She pressed both hands against the heart tree's bark, and suddenly the entire grove became a living theater. Images formed in the air above the growing trees, projected by the combined power of all 5 species working together. The alien representatives watched in shock as history unfolded before their eyes. They saw the plague of silence as it really was, not a natural disease but a carefully designed weapon. The images showed dark ships moving between human colonies, vessels that belonged to no known species. These ships carried biological agents specifically engineered to target the neural pathways that allowed humans to translate between alien languages. "The Devourers," Thornwarden Groot Ka whispered, his ancient memory finally recognizing the enemy they had all forgotten. "The hunger beings from the spaces between galaxies. They feed on chaos and war." More images flowed from the grove's memory banks, The Devourers had been watching the Alliance for decades, studying its strengths and weaknesses. They realized that humanity's translation abilities were the key to galactic peace. So they developed a weapon that would eliminate those abilities forever. But the images showed something else, something that made even the hostile alien representatives step back in shock. The Plague of Silence had not just targeted humans randomly. It had specifically attacked the families of translators, spreading through genetic lines to ensure that the gift could never be passed to future generations. Hana's great-great-grandmother, Ambassador Kang Bora, appeared in the projections as a young woman fighting desperately to maintain communication between the species, even as her own abilities began to fail. The images showed her working 18-hour days, pushing her failing brain to its limits as she tried to prevent misunderstandings from turning into wars. Songcaller Deep Current Runners. Mournful songs shifted to something that might have been recognition. Through her water songs, she spoke of memories her people had suppressed. We remember now. The human translators did not abandon us. They fought until their minds burned out from the effort. The projections showed the final days of the Alliance in heartbreaking detail. Human translators collapsing at their posts, their brains damaged beyond repair by the plague. Emergency sessions where alien representatives tried desperately to communicate without their human bridges, only to have every attempt at understanding dissolve into confusion and fear. Most painful of all were the images of Ambassador Bora's final message to the Alliance. She appeared as a dying woman, her face gaunt from the neural damage caused by fighting the plague for too long, but her voice was still strong as she spoke her last words as a translator. "My gift is gone," she said in a recording that the Grove had preserved for 3 centuries. "The sickness has taken from me the ability to hear your voices as friends. But know this, all peoples of the Alliance. Humanity will find a way to restore the bridge between worlds. Even if it takes 1,000 years, even if we must sacrifice everything we are, we will return to you." Mindwalker through empty spaces suddenly stopped their dimensional shifting, their form becoming solid for the first time since arriving. Through thoughts that no longer felt like ice, they projected concepts of shame and realization. We blamed the wrong enemy. The bridge builders did not choose to fall silent. They were murdered to break the harmony. But Rootguard's Strong Branch and Storm remained unmoved by the revelations. Their chemical speech still carried the poison of old hatred. Pretty images and tragic stories changed nothing. The Alliance still fell. The galaxy still burned. The growing world still withered. Without the life harmony to sustain them, Hana felt her strength, failing as the effort of maintaining the Grove's projections pushed her human nervous system beyond its limits. But she had one more truth to share, the most important one of all. "The Devourers are still out there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For 3 centuries they have fed on the chaos caused by the Alliance's collapse. Every war between our species, every act of hatred and mistrust has made them stronger. They are watching us right now, waiting to see if we will choose to heal or if we will choose to keep feeding them with our pain." The Grove's sensors, enhanced by the Awakening Network, detected movement in the dark spaces between stars, ships that existed partly outside normal reality, vessels that fed on conflict and grew stronger with every act of violence. The Devourers had been drawn by the psychic energy of 4 hostile fleets preparing for battle. For the first time in 3 centuries, all 4 species faced their real enemy. Crystal Singer Bright Edge of Dawn's crystal form dimmed as understanding finally penetrated her anger. The frequency destroyers used our hatred as a weapon against us. They turned us into the instruments of our own destruction. Songcaller Deep Current Runner's song shifted from mourning to something that sounded almost like hope. The ocean memories speak of ships that came in the darkness after the Alliance fell. Ships that whispered poison thoughts into the minds of our leaders. We thought they were allies offering comfort, but they were feeding on our despair. Even Rootguard's Strong Branch and Storm began to show signs of change. The warriors' barkskin patterns shifted as chemical memories surfaced from the deepest roots of their consciousness. The Root Network remembers visitors who came after the Great Dying, beings who encouraged us to hate all flesh forms instead of seeking understanding. They called themselves friends, but their presence made the growing sadness stronger. Mindwalker through empty spaces projected a concept that roughly translated as cosmic horror mixed with understanding. The hunger entities have been manipulating all species since Alliance death. They whispered thoughts of betrayal and revenge into every mind, feeding on conflicts they helped create. As this truth settled over the grove, something remarkable began to happen. The hatred and suspicion that had poisoned the air for the past several hours began to dissipate like morning fog. Not completely and not easily, but for the first time in 3 centuries, representatives of 4 different species began to see each other as potential friends rather than eternal enemies. But the cost of this revelation was enormous. Hana collapsed to her knees beside the heart tree, her body finally succumbing to the strain of channeling multiple alien consciousness streams through her human nervous system. The same genetic breakdown that had killed the original translators was burning through her brain, erasing neural pathways faster than they could be repaired. "The bridge builder is dying," Grutka observed sadly. "The gift burns too bright for flesh-form minds to contain." Dr. Wu Jaehyun knelt beside Hana, supporting her as she struggled to stay conscious. "There has to be another way. She cannot die now, not when we are so close to rebuilding the alliance." But Hana smiled weakly as she felt her consciousness beginning to fade. "I do not have to survive for the bridge to be complete. Look at what we have built together." Around them, the new forest continued to grow, no longer dependent on her individual will to survive. The trees had taken root in soil enriched by the understanding that had finally begun to flow between the species. Each alien representative had contributed something to the growing network. Whether they realized it or not, the grove itself had become a living translator, a forest that could facilitate communication between different forms of consciousness without requiring human sacrifice. It was not the same as the old alliance, but it was something new and potentially stronger. Songcaller Deep Current Runner approached the dying human with hesitation, then began to sing a healing song that carried 3 centuries of suppressed gratitude. Crystal Singer Bright Edge of Dawn added her crystal harmonies to the melody, frequencies of light that helped stabilize failing neural pathways. Even Mindwalker through empty spaces contributed, projecting thoughts of unity that helped hold Hana's fragmenting consciousness together, long enough for her to see what they were building. The combined healing songs of 4 alien species flowed through Hana's failing body like warm light, slowing the genetic breakdown that was killing her brain cell by cell. She felt her consciousness stabilizing, held together by the very beings who had come to destroy her only hours before. But the healing came with a price. Each species that contributed to saving her life also shared in the burden of translation. The grove's growing network began connecting their minds directly, creating a living web of understanding that no longer required a single human to bear the full weight of bridging different forms of consciousness. Crystal Singer Bright Edge of Dawn felt Verdani plant thoughts flowing through her crystal structure for the first time in 3 centuries. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant. Like sunlight filtered through leaves, the growing speech touches our harmonic frequencies without pain. How is this possible? Dr. Wu Jaehyun, his own abilities enhanced by contact with the grove, struggled to explain what was happening. The new forest is not just growing trees. It is growing connections. Each species contributes part of their consciousness to the network, and the network translates between all of them. Songcaller Deep Current Runners. Water Song shifted to wonder as she felt the mathematical poetry of Lumith, crystal speech harmonizing with her ocean melodies. The frequency singers create beauty in ways we never understood. Their light mathematics speak of order that complements our flow chaos. Even Mindwalker, through empty spaces, seemed amazed as thoughts from 4 different species flowed through their dimensional consciousness without causing the confusion that had plagued interspecies communication for centuries. The bridge forest creates understanding space where all thought forms can exist together. This is beyond what Old Alliance achieved. As the healing continued, Hana felt her strength slowly returning. But she was no longer the same person who had discovered the seed only days before. The process of awakening the grove had changed her at a fundamental level, burning out some human limitations while awakening abilities that bridge the gap between individual consciousness and collective understanding. "The Devourers," she whispered, suddenly remembering the dark ships that had been detected at the edge of the system. "They will not let this alliance rebuild without a fight." Thornwarden Grutka extended his root network deeper into the grove's growing foundation, connecting with sensors that had been dormant for centuries. The hunger beings circle like scavengers around a dying animal. But they have grown weak from 300 years of scattered feeding. They fear what we are building here. Through the grove's enhanced senses, all 5 species could now detect the Devourer ships moving in the darkness between stars. These were not the massive fleets that had once threatened entire galaxies, but smaller vessels weakened by centuries of feeding on the scraps of isolated conflicts, rather than the feast of galactic war they preferred. Root Guard, strong branch in storm, whose chemical speech had been softened by exposure to the grove's healing influence, made a sound that might have been approval. The root killers speak truth. The darkness feeders are fewer and weaker than in the old stories, but they still carry weapons that can destroy worlds. The realization that their ancient enemy was vulnerable gave new energy to the growing alliance. For the first time in 3 centuries, the 4 species began discussing strategy together, rather than simply hurling accusations at each other. My crystal ships can focus stellar energy into defensive barriers, Bright Edge of Dawn offered, her aggressive frequencies now modulated with harmonics of cooperation. But we need coordination with other fleet forms to be effective. The ocean songs can disrupt their feeding patterns, Deep Current Runner added. The hunger beings draw strength from conflict emotions. Our harmony melodies can starve them of the chaos they need to remain strong. Mindwalker. Through empty spaces projected concepts of dimensional warfare that roughly translated as tactical superiority. The darkness entities exist partly outside normal space. Fourth-act thought weapons can strike them in dimensions where other attacks cannot reach. Even Strong Branch and Storm contributed to the planning. The root networks can coordinate all fleet movements through living channels that the hunger beings cannot detect or disrupt. As the Alliance representatives worked together, their individual fleets above began to change formation. Instead of 4 separate groups preparing to destroy each other, they started moving into the coordinated pattern of a unified defense force. Ships that had been enemies for centuries began sharing tactical data and coordinating weapon systems. Hana watched this transformation with wonder and growing hope, but she also felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The Grove had chosen her as its primary voice, the human who would speak for the new alliance in its dealings with the galaxy. "This is not the same as the old treaty," she said, addressing all the representatives at once. "We cannot rebuild exactly what existed before because that system was too fragile. It depended too much on human translators, making it vulnerable to the kind of attack the Devourers used against us." She gestured toward the heart tree, where new growth continued to spiral upward toward the stars. "This alliance will be different. Each species will maintain some ability to understand the others, connected through the Grove's living network. No single group will bear the full burden of translation." Communications Officer Park Soo-jin, her abilities now enhanced by permanent connection to the Grove, began broadcasting the new covenant to every ship in both the Allied fleets and the approaching Devourer vessels. Her words were automatically translated into dozens of languages and broadcast across all known frequencies. "We, the representatives of 5 species united in purpose, declare the formation of a new alliance based on shared understanding and mutual support. We reject the isolation and hatred that has poisoned our galaxy for 3 centuries. We choose connection over separation, cooperation over conflict, hope over despair." The Devourer ships, detecting the psychic energy of genuine unity beginning to form around Kepler 442b, began to retreat into the dark spaces between dimensions. They had fed on division and chaos for so long that the growing harmony felt like poison to their alien senses. But even as their immediate enemies fled, the representatives knew that the real work was just beginning. 300 years of mistrust and hatred could not be erased in a single day. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when the old prejudices threatened to tear apart what they were building. "The covenant signing must be different this time," Grutka observed, his ancient wisdom helping to guide the ceremony. Not just leaders making promises, but all peoples of all worlds contributing to the living bond. Over the following days, representatives from hundreds of worlds began arriving at Kepler 442b. Not just political leaders and military commanders, but artists, scientists, farmers, teachers, and ordinary citizens who wanted to be part of building something better than what had existed before. Each visitor contributed something to the growing grove. Verdani brought seeds from their home forests. Lumith offered crystal matrices that could store and amplify the network's translation abilities. Nerion brought water from their deepest oceans, charged with songs of healing and hope. Forthak contributed thought crystals that could bridge dimensions and connect minds across vast distances. And humans brought what they had always brought to the Alliance: the willingness to serve as bridges translators and healers of ancient wounds. The signing ceremony took place beneath the heart tree, now grown tall enough to shelter representatives from 1,000 different worlds. But instead of a single document signed by a few leaders, the new covenant was inscribed directly into the living wood of the grove itself, written in patterns that could be read by eyes, sensors, chemical receptors, and dimensional perception organs. As Hannah placed her hand on the heart tree's bark for the final time, she felt the weight of history and hope flowing through the grove's network. The alliance that had died 3 centuries ago was gone forever. But what they were building in its place was stronger and more resilient than anything that had existed before. "We are not the same species we were when we first met," she said. Her words carried to every corner of the galaxy by the grove's living communication system. "We have been changed by pain and separated by misunderstanding. But those changes have also made us wiser. We know now that unity does not mean becoming identical. It means choosing to value our differences while working together toward common goals." The new forest continued to grow around them, its roots reaching deep into the soil of shared understanding, while its branches stretched toward a future where the galaxy itself could become a garden tended by friends who had learned to see beauty in difference and strength in cooperation. Hannah lived long enough to see the first Devourer ship surrender rather than face the united fleets of 5 species working in perfect harmony. She lived to see trade routes reopened between worlds that had been isolated for centuries. She lived to see children from different species playing together beneath trees that sang in languages of light and sound and growing things and pure thought.